Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome into Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Today, we're just going to get into a theory about Stranger Things. What if Callie, number 8, is the mind flayer? Today, the theory board is getting a little wild because we're asking a question that could completely flip the way we look at Stranger Things. What if Callie, number 8, is actually the mind flayer? Not just an ally, not just a side character who showed up in season 2 and then disappeared, but the physical embodiment, or at least the hidden face, of the mind flayer itself. Now, on paper, this sounds insane. The official material describes Callie as a human test subject from Hawkins' lab whose gift is creating powerful illusions inside other people's minds. She can make you see whatever she wants, or make you not see what she doesn't want you to notice. Meanwhile, the mind flayer is presented as this vast alien hive mind from the upside down, a being that invades thoughts, twists reality, and uses people as hosts to carry out its will. So at first glance, these are two separate entities. One is a numbered child from Brenna's program, the other is a cosmic nightmare made of shadow. But let's lean into the theory and see how far it can go. Let's set the stage. Think back to when the Mind Flayer really stepped into the spotlight. It was season 2. That's also the season when we met Callie, number 8, in a serious way. Callie's powers are all about perception. She doesn't just create random hallucinations. She targets people's deepest fears and forces them to live inside those fears. If that sounds familiar, it's because the Mind Flayer, and later Vecna, do something very similar. They invade people's minds, replay trauma, and use memory and emotion as weapons. So the first building block of the theory is simple. Callie and the Mind Flayer operate on the same battlefield, inside the mind. How the powers line up? Let's look at Callie's ability in detail. She can make people see spiders, monsters, entire environments that aren't actually there. She can hide people from perception, essentially deleting them from someone's visual reality. Now think about the Mind Flayer and the broader upside-down threat. The Mind Flayer sends visions. It manipulates what characters feel, hear, and see, often pushing them toward fear and submission. Both Callie and the Mind Flayer weaponize fear and memory. Attack from within the mind rather than just brute force. They blur the line between what's real and what's illusion. That overlap is exactly what fuels this theory. Maybe the similarity isn't a coincidence. Maybe that we've been pushing what we've been calling an illusion, and Callie and psychic invasion and the Mind Flayer are different faces of the same underlying power. Now let's get into the physical embodiment angle. Callie might be the physical embodiment or anchor of the Mind Flayer in the human world. In other words, the Mind Flayer could be this massive, abstract hive mind in the upside down. But to truly interact with human consciousness, to create focus, personal illusion, it needs a human interface. Callie, with her rare and unique abilities among the test subjects, fits the role almost too well. Under this version of the theory, the Mind Flayer is the overarching entity. Callie is its avatar, its primary vessel, or even the unsuspecting origin of its power. Her illusion ability is the prototype of the psychic manipulation the Mind Flayer later perfects and expands on. This would explain why her powers feel thematically aligned with the larger villain, but also why she's so rare and special among the kids in the program. There's also a thematic angle. Callie's episodes emphasize how trauma and fear can be exploited. She pushes characters to confront their worst memories and then bends those memories to her advantage. The Mind Flayer and Vecna do the same thing but on a grander scale. They use trauma like a weapon, turning personal pain into a gateway for control. So if Stranger Things is telling a story where the real battleground is the human mind, then tying Callie to the Mind Flayer would be a very on-theme twist. It would turn a seemingly one-off character into a crucial piece of the psychological horror puzzle. Now let's talk about how this theory could play out in story. Let's imagine how the show could actually use this idea. Option 1, Callie is fully conscious of this connection. Maybe at some point she encountered the same dark forces that Henry did, this swirling, spider-like shadow in the upside down, and instead of being overwhelmed, she fused with it. She could be acting with a hidden agenda, nudging events so that Hawkins and Eleven move in a direction that secretly benefit the Mind Flayer. Her illusions wouldn't be just tricks. They would be test runs of a much larger plan. Now let's think about option 2. Callie is totally unaware. She thinks her power is her own, but the Mind Flayer has been piggybacking on it from the start. It uses her psychic frequency like a broadcast tower, amplifying its reach into humankind's. In that version, Callie becomes a tragic figure. She's not the mastermind, she's the exploited interface. Her return later in the story could then revolve around discovering that she has been enabling the very evil she thought she was fighting, and having to choose whether to sever that connection, even if it costs her life or her powers. Why the theory clashes. Now here's where this theory runs into real trouble. The more straightforward reading of the show and the official explanations is that the Mind Flayer is an existing entity from the Upside Down that Henry/Vecna discovers and shapes, not a transformed human like Callie. They also present Callie as a human test subject with a grounded backstory tied to Brenna's experiments into Eleven's past. When she reappears in later material, the focus is on how her illusion powers might help in the fight against Vecna and the Mind Flayer, not on her secretly being the Mind Flayer. So if we go strictly by what's on screen and in the accompanying commentary, the safer conclusion is that Callie is separate from the Mind Flayer. Her role is more likely to be an ally, an anti-hero, or a wildcard who can change Vecna's mental games rather than the core villain in disguise. But why the theory still matters. Even if the writers never confirm anything like this, the Callie is the Mind Flayer idea does something valuable for the way we watch the show. It forces us to pay closer attention to how similar powers echo across different characters, how trauma, memory, and fear are treated as weapons by both human, physics, and upside-down entities, how a character who seemed like a detour in Season 2 might secretly be thematically central to the endgame. In other words, the theory may not be legit, but it sharpens the themes. So is Callie, number 8, actually the Mind Flayer? If you go by the official story so far, the answer is probably no. But as speculative lens, it's powerful. It reframes Callie from the lost sister who showed up once into a potential keystone of the psychic war at the heart of Stranger Things. And it reminds us that in this universe, the scariest monsters don't always come from another dimension. Sometimes they grow out of the human mind, out of the experiments, trauma, and the desire to control what other people see and feel. Whether or not the show ever goes that far, it's a theory that keeps the Upside Down feeling bigger, stranger, and more dangerous than ever. So what do you guys think? Is Callie, number 8, the Mind Flayer? We're going to have to see on Thursday, but I think she could be. You know, you had her and 11 saying they had to sacrifice themselves, and she's playing a lot of games there. She's playing a lot of end games, mind games. So let's see. But peace and love. Uncle Jimmy out.